Hey everybody, Dr. Brad Dieter from Science Driven Nutrition and Need to Perform. Welcome to the very first episode of our supplement review. So this is going to be a video series where we essentially open up the black box of the supplement industry. So a lot of us spend a lot of time and money and energy really worrying about, what is in the supplements that we take and whether they work. And so the whole point of this video series is to really walk you through supplements and break down the ingredients, break down what they do, if there's evidence to support them, break down dosing, if the dosing in the actual supplement is the right type of dose for you. And the other thing is we'll also talk pragmatically, right? There's the hardcore science and then there's the applied world, and we're going to try to bring both. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reviewing 1, 2, 3, 4 supplements an episode. It'll just kind of depend on what we get coming in on a weekly basis. So I wanted to do the very first one on something that we have, kind of hard physical products of here at Science Driven Nutrition. And I wanted to start with some ones that are more fairly well known. So the very first one that we're going to break down is C4 Extreme. So this is from Cellacore. This is pretty popular. It's been on the market for a long time. And what I want to do is I want to break down essentially all the ingredients in it. So I'm going to take a real quick minute here to show you the label. If you can't see this, I'm going to have a list in the comments below. But essentially what's in here is vitamin C, calcium, niacin, folic acid. We've got some vitamin B12, beta-alanine, creatine nitrate, arginine. They call it arginine AKG here, N-Acetyl-Tyrosine, and caffeine, Anhydrous. And then they have this explosive energy blend. You can probably see that right there. Basically, it's got the explosive energy blend has the N-Acetyl-L-Tyrosine, the caffeine Anhydrous, Mucuna puriens, which is basically it's for L-Dopa. We'll talk about that in a second. Bitter orange, which is also known as Synephrine. That's the compound in it that has any biological activities. Niacinamide, folic acid, and just some vitamins and stuff like that. So first, let's talk. Let's just kind of break things down in terms of what's really important and what actually does anything. So the vitamins, the niacin, and all those sorts of things, obviously not going to give you a big boost of energy. Vitamin B12, the amount in here is so small, it's not going to do anything. So those are kind of they just put them in there because that would be my assumption. I guess it adds a little bit to your micronutrition. But let's get into the really kind of big key players and heavy hitters. So beta-alanine, it's at about 1.5 grams. You can see 1,500 milligrams. Now, beta-alanine is an interesting supplement in that it's not really an actual pre-workout. So beta-alanine works by accumulating in your muscles. Essentially, it helps buffer some of the hydrogen ion accumulation that occurs in muscle tissue that can kind of contribute to muscle performance, right? So what it does is the more beta-alanine you have in your muscles, the greater buffer capacity you have. So harken back to Chemistry 101, buffering, hydrogen ions, sequestration, things like that. So essentially, it should allow you to work kind of in that acidotic, I'm going to use that very loosely, range. And beta-alanine is shown to improve performance in that window and kind of elongate your ability to train, but it doesn't work acutely. It has to accumulate in your muscle tissues, and typically you need a dose a little bit higher than 1.5 grams on a daily basis to really get a good effect. Now, beta-alanine is often marketed as a pre-workout supplement because if you take enough of it, and this is kind of, I think it's more of a genetic thing or just an individual thing, where some people will get a tingly feeling from it. It's called paresthesia. And so that's kind of why it's put in a lot of pre-workout supplements, is it gives the effect of doing something. Now, whether that translates into a placebo effect and actually improves performance because you think it's doing something is a debate for a different topic, but beta-alanine is in here. If you take 2-3 scoops of this a day, you're going to get enough beta-alanine accumulating over time to have an effect, or you can go the cheaper route and take total beta-alanine. The next one is creatine nitrate, a form of creatine, and then basically creatine is just like beta-alanine where it works by bioaccumulation, so it's not really an extensive pre-workout supplement. So basically you can take this and get some creatine, but to really meet your daily needs, you're probably going to need 5 scoops of this because 5 grams of creatine is really kind of what you need. Arginine. So this is one that is thought to cause vasodilation because L-arginine gets biochemically, it goes from arginine to nitric oxide, some chemical pathways in the middle, not important, but that should essentially kind of increase vasodilation and oxygen delivery to muscle tissue and things like that. But when you actually look at the literature, the results are all over the place. Arginine sometimes results in greater blood oxygen flow, not a lot. Some studies show no effect. The dosing on here is, fairly small. It's about 1 gram. I think most studies are a little bit higher, usually 2 to 3 to 5 grams. I think I'd have to go back and double check that, but the dosing here is pretty low. And the other thing is, of those studies that did show some sort of increase in oxygenation and blood flow, there was no improvement in performance. So the idea of taking L-arginine to increase, vasodilation and oxygen delivery to muscles to increase performance doesn't really hold up. So, so far we've seen most of the ingredients probably aren't going to do a whole lot in terms of acute, but that doesn't mean it's useless, right? We've got caffeine in here. So there's 135 milligrams of caffeine. Now, to put that in cups of coffee dosages, your average cup of coffee has about 95 grams. So this is, you could say this is right about 1.5 cups of coffee. So if you take 2 scoops of this, that's essentially 3 cups of coffee. If you're like John North, the Olympic weightlifter, who will take 4 scoops of this at a time, that's like 6 cups of coffee. So that's probably why John can always lift so hard. Now let's talk about this, because that's probably the main primary ingredient, and I want to break down some of the effects of caffeine. So caffeine really works primarily by antagonizing adenosine receptors in the brain, and that's kind of how it basically, adenosine kind of causes drowsiness, and caffeine kind of prevents that. So it increases alertness and combats drowsiness. There's caffeine, it's distributed throughout the body, not just the brain, so it can interact with receptors on, not just brain cells, but all over the body, and it can increase the release of adrenaline and cortisol. And so caffeine, is probably one of the most effective pre-workout supplements that we have on the market. It's shown to increase power output in some studies, but it's not really 1 rep max power. It's more like 3 to 5 rep max power in Wingate testing. It's probably primarily due to reduction in pain perception, but it also may be in the fact that it can mobilize intramuscular calcium a little bit more as well. Now, there's some thoughts about caffeine and fat oxidation and things like that. Based on the literature, the fat loss, fat oxidation effect of caffeine is not super clear, and I don't really think the effect is that robust. A lot of the fat that's mobilized or liberated from taking caffeine is actually not burned, it's kind of recycled. So it really kind of depends. I wouldn't take caffeine thinking it's a fat burner. I'd probably take it more thinking it can give me a little bit of an energy boost through my workouts. Now, the important thing to note about the caffeine in here is that you get this habituation effect. So, you get used to the caffeine, and over time, the effects are less and less. Think about the first time you took a pre-workout supplement, aside from the beta-alanine and the creatine and the arginine and stuff like that, you definitely got a big boost, and over time that boost kind of is reduced and you don't see as much of an effect. So, the caffeine is really the main ingredient in here, and you do get a decent dose, right? You get about 135 milligrams, so if you want a cheaper source of caffeine, just drink a cup of coffee. Now, there's a few other things in here that we need to talk about. There's I'm going to butcher this, but Mucuna puriens. This is also known as velvet bean, which is kind of a cool name. Now, the aim of that supplement is actually to increase L-dopa. L-dopa can be converted into dopamine, and it can actually improve adrenaline and noradrenaline, but it was in a very specific population. And so I don't really think it has any relation to substantial improvement on performance. It's probably just, kind of a filler in here. It doesn't really do much. Now, the next one is the Synephrine, or the bitter orange. So it is a stimulant, and it also acts as an agonist for adrenergic receptors. However, it's not really potent. So the caffeine is going to really give you the effect. The Synephrine in here, if I was making a pre-workout supplement, I wouldn't put Synephrine and caffeine in the same supplement. I think it's kind of a waste. You're kind of putting 2 very similar products on top of each other, one that's a lot less effective. So the Synephrine is is probably not doing a whole lot. Now, one of the other things is there has been some research to show that it is a mild stimulant, but it's also been marketed for fat burning. And when you really look at the research, synephrine is not really a fat burner. So that's kind of that piece. So that kind of wraps up the C4, right? I think kind of my views are, as a pre-workout, it's got some things in it that are helpful. You know, the caffeine obviously is pretty good. It tastes pretty good, so if you don't like coffee and you want some pre-workouts, mix this up, throw it in your shake. But all the other stuff, the beta-alanine can contribute to your overall beta-alanine. I mean, it's not hurting you. The creatine also kind of can help add to the total daily creatine needs. And so those would probably be the key things I would focus on is it adds to your total beta-alanine, it adds to your total daily creatine, and it has some caffeine. So, you know, there's a lot of ingredients here that aren't really helpful. You know, Cellucor could probably drop out some of those ingredients and save you guys a few bucks. So Cellucor, if you want someone to help you guys formulate, you can call me. That was just kind of a joke. So that's really that one. Now the next one I want to bring up is I got a sample sent to me of this Hydroxycut Hardcore Next Gen. I think when you put Hardcore Next Gen on something, it makes it more effective instantly. That's the way the marketing world works. Now this one is actually interesting. I'm going to hold this up, see if you guys can see that. I'm going to read the ingredient list here in a second. But really the primary ingredients are green coffee blend, caffeine, Forskolin, which provides Forskolin. We're going to talk about that. There's some really cool names in here. Blue Skullcap extract, Yohimbe, Ophiogon, and Guayusa. So I'm probably butchering some of those names. But let's talk about each of these ingredients and their dosing. So, you know, green coffee bean, it's a type of coffee that's higher in a specific compound called chlorogenic acid. It's primarily marketed as a fat loss supplement. And, you know, it actually has been shown to have some benefits on weight loss in overweight individuals. And there's some evidence to suggest lower blood pressure and improved function of blood vessels. But the results aren't super potent. So this is not, you know, this is not going to be a huge game changer for people. But there is some evidence that it might provide some small effect, the green coffee blend for the overweight population. But I want to dive into a little bit more of the actual research because I think it's important. So there is actually one double-blind placebo-controlled trial that's looked at long-term use of green coffee itself, just in isolation, not in something like this. And there was actually probably about a 3.5 kilogram or 7 pound greater difference taking 500 milligrams a day over 12 weeks. Now, a lot of times there's some confounding variables with these kind of studies, but I think there is some benefit to higher doses of this in that type of population. But again, I wouldn't really hold that this is going to be the game changer. I think there is some benefits to some of the green coffee blend, but this is at 400 milligrams, so it's almost at that dose. So, I think we should probably move on to the next one. So the next one is actually, caffeine. We just talked about caffeine in the C4 one, but this is actually dosed at 290 milligrams. So that's, right about 3 cups of coffee. So there's a lot of caffeine. So you're probably going to get a definite caffeine kick from this, which will definitely make it feel like it's actually doing something. So this could be quite the intense pre-workout if you took it as a pre-workout with that much caffeine. Now the next one, Forskolin, is kind of interesting. In general, Forskolin has actually been shown to be somewhat effective in reducing fat mass in obese and overweight patients. But those studies took the equivalent of 500 milligrams of Forskolin a day. And this only has 100. So it's kind of a fifth of the effective dose. But when you layer that on top of all the other stuff, this is one of those supplements that really needs some really good randomized controlled trials because there's some interesting things in here, but we don't really have the combination effect. That's one of the things to note about. There's some Chinese medicine things in here we're going to talk about, but those a lot of times have medical interactions, so we need to really be careful and get some randomized controlled trials for supplements like these. So Forskolin has some evidence, but not at the dosages in this product. So they need to have more in here if they really want to say that the Forskolin's doing anything. The blue skullcap extract, well, that's a really super cool name. There's no human data to support supplementation in it. There's some studies from animals that there may be some benefit, but one of the problems with that is the equivalent dose of that would be about 500 milligrams in humans. There's only 75 in here, so again, not super effective. The next one, Yohimbe. This one's actually super interesting, and there's some data to suggest that it can actually be helpful for fat loss, especially in sports. Or it's been shown to be effective in already lean people. So there was a study. It was a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial where 20 milligrams per day for 3 weeks led to a decrease from 9.3% body fat to 7.1%. So it's actually a pretty interesting finding. So it suggests that it may be beneficial, but I think more studies, more well-controlled studies need to be done before I would be confident in saying you should take Yohimbe. But what's in here is actually 40 milligrams, which is above the dose used in that study. It's almost twice. So there may actually be some benefit from the Yohimbe piece. Now the other ones, just kind of wrapping this up, the Ophiogon extract and the Guayusa. So those are more found in the Chinese herbal medicine community, and there's some evidence in animals that do certain things, but I've actually done personally animal mice research, and to quote a lot of people, we can do a lot of things in mice but not a lot of things in humans, and so none of that data actually translates. So kind of my thoughts on Hydroxycut are there's some really interesting chemicals in here and ingredients that may have some benefit. I think they need to be well tested when used in conjunction with each other, because a lot of them use redundant mechanisms in the body. The dosages are kind of super high in some, not high enough in the others, which is probably coming from a cost-effective business model thing. So I think that needs to be addressed a little bit more. All right, so that is episode 1 of the supplement review. So we've got the C4 that we talked all about. We've got this Hydroxycut Hardcore Next Gen. Hope you guys really enjoyed the talk. And if you guys have any questions or you have other supplements, hit us up and we'll make sure we're reviewing them in the next one. Anyway, Dr. Brad out. We'll see you guys later. Take care.